Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you've found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falash, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining me this week because I've got yet another fan favorite with me here today. And he's going to be talking to us about growing without outpacing your foundation. Now, that alone should provide a little bit of a clue that far too many owners make a mad dash with multiplication in mind, adding locations, which we love, without being on really solid footing, both structurally and operationally first, which we don't love, but we can, of course, help you with that. Anyhow, today, my colleague Adin Bradley is going to walk us through some strategies based on his many years in multi-site healthcare. And he's going to give us a preview of what he'll be presenting on during our January Masterclass in Charlotte. And you're going to want to catch him live at the event, so I'll definitely link to it in the show notes a little bit later. Adin, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to be here.
Good to see you. So we're going to jump in and talk about what you're going to be sharing with people at the event in January 14th through 16th. With the content being on the 15th and 16th, but your presentation is called Solving for Scale. And I mentioned in my little intro there that we do see a lot of people that just want to add locations, but they're not really ready. So disaster ensues because we've seen it before, right?
Yeah, for sure. Great lead in as always. Often when you and I chat, we touch on, a couple things that are a common theme throughout our conversations because they ring true regardless of what someone's really trying to solve for. So, in today's episode, as we were chatting offline, I got into really thinking about, how to frame this. So if we think for our listener what a foundation is, it's the same as our house, right? You build a quote unquote foundation and everything around there is built around that. And if the foundation is not solid, you can't add anything further to that without sort of breaking the foundation, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of a crude analogy. So, what does it take? And I'll just sort of tease a little bit. There's really three pillars, right? There's what we're looking to do, which is to have sustainable operations, which means we can continue to grow without the foundation or the culture, suffering. What does ownership and equity alignment look like the bigger we get? It's sort of counterintuitive. The more money that gets involved and the larger we get is where alignment becomes a little bit disjointed. Owners or even associates that have earned equity sometimes want different things. So we got to make sure that we are always aligned in what we want. And then obviously the cultural and clinical consistency has got to run throughout the entire organization, because as you either bring on growth through de novo or acquisition or a hybrid of them, the clinical and cultural consistencies, protocols, whatever word you want to use, have got to remain consistent throughout.
Sure. So the wheels fall off the bus there. There's no point in adding locations. So let's rewind a little bit about the foundation. So what are some of the elements, without giving away, too much of your presentation, what are some of those foundational elements that have to be in place in order for us to build on that foundation?
Well, I think, when we talk about building a foundation, what we're really building is the operational background of the group, whether it be multi-locations, or in some instances, we have some groups that have actually grown under the same roof, up to 37, 40, 50 operatories. And even though it's under one roof, it's still the same. So what we're really looking to do is determine when to centralize. And then as we centralize certain departments, key departments like revenue cycle, supply chain and spend, human resources, to name a few, finance could be one, is not only when, but then what does the bandwidth look like when we have to then begin to add on to that layer of the foundation? right? So if you were to hire one revenue cycle manager to handle X number of offices, at what point do they need a little bit of help as we begin to grow without any of the processes falling off or becoming inconsistent? It's very easy to add on to that. And then as we standardize processes, what we're really focusing obviously is new patient flow, treatment planning, and I'll throw like hygiene recall and reappointments in there. How are we continuing to create the same patient outcomes at every office or every new operatory, again with the core values and foundation staying intact?
So let's talk about sustainability. When we're talking about scaling operations, what makes something sustainable?
So I think what you want to build early on is almost like a checklist.
Hmm.
And for our listeners that recall the cliches of wax on, wax off, and sand the floor, it always elicits a chuckle from both of us. However, if you really stop and think back to where those cliches came from, they were taught to somebody that didn't even realize they were being taught the fundamentals. Okay, so for those like, what is Aiden talking about? What's Jamie talking about? We're talking about the Karate Kid here, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
of course. Of
and
course.
and and the things that he was doing were the foundation of his mastery of karate, and he
Hmm.
didn't realize it, but it became so embedded that as he got better, he always went back to those core fundamental tactics. So when we talk about this checklist, our operational systems consistent across every location. Okay. And I say that because if we start to get a little bit loose with them, you become very loose with them as the organization gets bigger. Do we have the leadership depth to support more sites? And what I mean by that is, you know, often we have a super GP or a doc and a really great office manager at one office, and we think this is great. We're just going to replicate it at office 2 and 3, but those people can't be cloned. So
Mm,
Are you
sadly.
are you measuring the proficiency and skill set and philosophy of an associate or a potential partner, the office manager, your internal team? Do they all share your core values, and do you have a very regimented way that you provide dentistry? Are the KPIs stable and improving? Many times we see some groups, and this is sort of counterintuitive, they get to a specific level, and the bigger they get, they actually become less profitable because they're not gaining scale. They're just simply building on that foundation extra layers without really getting subject matter expertise within certain departments where fewer people could do it in a more efficient manner, right? That's just really the definition of scale.
Yeah.
And then is the ownership and equity model aligned and understood, meaning are all the owners or associates really on the same page, driving towards, the same outcomes? And then lastly, is our clinical quality strong and measurable? And some say, well, how do I measure that? Well, you measure that through patient satisfaction. You measure it through attrition. You measure it through case acceptance from your case presentation. And then obviously on the bottom line, is your EBITDA growing? Is your cash flow higher? If you are building on your foundation and scaling properly, the answer to all of that should be yes.
Yeah, agree. In fact, on my last podcast with Dr. Vivek Solanki, who's going to be presenting most of Thursday at this January event, we were just talking about this clinical alignment, operational alignment, and how that all has to marry together in order for this to work.
Mhm.
Like you were mentioning before, building that foundation of systems, making sure clinical excellence is supported operationally, making sure ownership and equity structures are in place. And let's touch on that for a little bit. When, let's say you've got one or two locations, when should you be thinking about that type of situation? Are you going to offer equity? Should that be at location one? Is that in your strategic plan for the next, 3, 5, 10 years? Or when is that incorporated into your plan?
Yeah, I think, it's a great question. When should you start thinking about it? You should start thinking about it right away.
Mhm.
And I think that you should have a plan in place, even if you don't have a potential or a specific associate to enter that plan. But what you're doing throughout their first, say, year or so of clinical mentorship is asking yourself, first of all, are they aligned with our vision? Number one.
Mhm.
Number two, do they promote the culture of the organization and do things the way that we do it and they believe in it? And more importantly, is this someone that I feel like I'm going to continue my journey with, that I want on my team? And the answer, and are they expanding their clinical skill set? If they check all those boxes, right, that is someone that I want to be prepared for in advance to say, we have a partnership pathways program, an associate equity program in place that we would like to present to you. And then there you take away the sort of carrot part where, well, we're going to do this, right? And then
Mhm.
associates are always kind of waiting on it.
Yeah.
And instead it says, we've had this all along and we have been mentoring and watching and developing. And what we see, we really like, and we feel really confident that we want you on our team and we are prepared to offer you X, right? It's very transparent, it's very tangible, and it gets the associates to sort of recalibrate, like, I may have thought of leaving, I may have thought of moving, I may have even thought of opening up my own practice, but this is such a great opportunity for me. I can't resist it.
Absolutely. And Mark Flock, our partnerships executive, will be presenting on that just following your presentation at the January event. But all of this has to tie together. So thank
Mhm.
you for covering that for us here today, too, because it is part of the foundation. Like you have to know what you want in the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years because it will evolve. And as we all know, time flies right by. And suddenly you're getting ready to open more locations. And like you said, you can't clone yourself. So
Yeah, I think
what's the plan?
Yeah, and often when we meet with new clients or prospects, or we talk at in our master classes or our events, I always ask, what is the ultimate end goal, right? Is it exit? Is it just continued growth? Is there a specific number, a strategic partnership? And then we work our way backwards from that goal because every decision that you make has that end result in line. If not, you're essentially letting each day run you, hoping
Mhm.
that there's not enough chaos to cause a problem. But
Yeah.
when you're very intentional about an end result, the decisions that you make along the way are for that. And I'll just give a crude analogy that I'm sure almost everyone on here can relate to. There's 32 NFL football teams. If you ask them what is your end result, hopefully it's to win the Super Bowl. Whether it's this year, whether it's 4 or 5 years in the draft, right? They're building a foundation to get there.
Mhm.
Every decision they make, every pick they make, everyone they hire is a deliberate piece of the foundation that's going to get them to their end result. If they don't have an end result in mind, they just exist every day. They just go out and
Yeah.
play the game with complete chaos,
Right.
right? And then in 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, you think I have not gotten any better. As a matter of fact, I have potentially gotten worse.
Yeah, because you're still running in that reactive state. When you and I did that Train Wrecks and Silver Bullets podcast back in the spring, it comes back to that. Are you proactive? Are you making a plan? Or are you just reacting and living your day to day, hoping nothing goes wrong? What if you lose an associate? What if you lose a provider? What are you going to do?
We just experienced a high amount of turnover in one particular office. And now this is a group at 9 practices.
Hmm.
And what I'd asked is, why would this have taken us by surprise? And I think part of it is there was either misalignment with some of the team members. They didn't really know what the purpose was, or we we were not paying attention to the signals that were already there.
Or a
So
combination?
yeah, exactly. And you mentioned, what if an associate leaves? There's going to be times where life gets in the way, and we've seen it where an associate did not want to leave, but maybe a spouse got a job, across the country, or
Yeah.
they wanted to be closer to home. They didn't leave because it was a cultural issue, but what we say is never stop recruiting, ever. Always be talking to associates. Always look for that diamond in the rough. Always look for somebody that's going to make your team better and find a place for them. yeah, if someone leaves because the foundation is so strong, we have someone that can just sort of fit into that spot, and you're not going to go back where your clinical outcomes don't change, your culture doesn't change, your ownership alignment doesn't change, everything stays the same.
Yeah, and you're looking to make sure that people that are part of your foundation are people that you want with you for the long haul. Are you aligned clinically? Are you aligned operationally? And I keep going back to the clinical side just because those systems are what can really be the powerhouse behind driving your EBITDA. And it just, no matter what you're doing, I'll go back to something that you were talking about before. Like, what are you trying to build? That's the
Mhm.
question, right? Is this a legacy business? Do you have, family that you want to leave this to? Do you want to build it and hang around for a little bit? Do you want to ride off into the sunset? Like, what do you want to do? But to be honest with you, there's really just one answer to that question because we have to build a business with maximum value. So really you're building it to sell whether or not you're selling it. So,
Yeah, ultimately, and I know some are, are hard and fast where I'm never going to sell. And I'm thinking, well,
yeah,
the
that's okay.
the alternative to that is that you're just going to sunset the practice one day, and that doesn't make very much sense.
No.
So, at some point, you're going to be forced into monetizing your life's work, however that looks. But I
Mhm.
think I think you have sort of operations development, and then you've got provider development. And as
Right.
long as our foundation keeps running along those two tracks, and then cohesively they work together, I think you'll build a really strong foundation. And for those that are deliberate in their end journey being a sale, or most of the time it's a partnership, it's really not a full-blown sale, you really gain value in predictability and having a really robust foundation where your partner doesn't have to invest a lot of dollars into strengthening the foundation. And moreover, there's not a lot of risk to the business going backwards because the model has been proven time again. And we've actually seen some groups that we have helped, that we've brought to market, where the partner, the private equity partner, has actually leaned on them for operational or clinical expertise.
Oh wow.
I was talking to one of a director of operations that we had from a group that we sold not too long ago, and I asked how things are going. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, they just gave me 6 more practices to oversee." And I said, "Well, isn't that a great thing?"
Yeah.
And and I think it's because they did things so well and foundationally were so strong that the group thought, boy, there's some real value in learning what they do instead of trying to change what they do. And I give a lot of these groups credit for having the moxie to say, I need help to do that. So,
That's tough.
we're going to keep coming back to the same couple pillars. It is doing the right thing the same way every single day, every single person. And I'll add, because I know I've said this before, often because the owner who started the business and still in the chair is such a big economic driver, that they're so ingratiated in having to drive more production to keep the engine going, that they don't have time to do clinical mentorship or rounds or check case notes. So those around them don't really get better because there's not someone there. And you mentioned earlier with Dr. Vivek Solanki, I work with him professionally, and I'm telling you, there's nobody better that has really made it his mission to get every associate that he has to be a better version of themselves. Now, could he jump in the chair and do ten or $15,000 a day in production? Easily.
No
But what
doubt.
he has found is, why don't I want 10 of my associates
Right.
that can do a
There
million,
it is.
$1 or $1.5 million a year? So
Yeah,
he's
that's
made
exactly
that.
it.
Yeah, he's made that investment, and it's proven to work across the spectrum.
Right. And that's the foundation that we're really looking there because that production equals free cash flow. I mean, it's direct correlation. So when we talk about building that foundation and not outpacing it, I'm really excited that you and Mark Flock and DeWalker, our CEO, and Vivek are all going to be there to present, and our
Mm,
attendees are going to walk out of there with things that they can implement Monday morning. And what's really nice about it is it's a more intimate setting. And I've said this on a couple other podcasts. This is not your big ballroom type of conference. This is let's talk one-on-one. If you have a question, interrupt. This is time to work together. This is time to be thinking about your business plan, be thinking about how you're growing your business clinically, how your operations marry into that, how partnerships play into that, and how all of these things come together. So I'm super excited for what you're presenting and how that's going to tie into everyone else's as well.
Yeah, same here. And you know what I really, really enjoy about these is that the material is very relevant, and
Mm-hmm.
nearly everyone in the room, because a lot of times owners will bring some of their operational or clinical staff with them, and they get a
Yeah,
lot out of it too.
sure.
But what I love is, either dinner or those less structured times where you see owners talk to one another, or
Mm-hmm.
or operations leaders or associates talking to one another, and they're not hearing it necessarily from Polaris. They're hearing it from somebody that's sort of in the same boat as them. And they talk about, the trials and tribulations and the war stories together. And I think it makes them feel like this is not just me. Like a lot of people experience this, and attending this class and really getting involved with the subject matter gives you a leg up, because now when you go back, like you said, these are things that you can literally start implementing right away. And we find a lot of people come out of there like they're just chomping at the bit to get back in the office and start changing things. And I'll say, do that, but take a very measured approach to it. Have a really good look at the organization and say, okay, which part of my quote unquote foundation is already strong, and which part is not as strong. But then for those that are not as strong, I have to sort of rack and stack what needs immediate attention.
Yeah.
Because if you start making everything important, nothing is important.
Yeah, you've got to
So
triage first.
yeah, that's a better word for it. Thanks, Jan. I was looking for the right word on the fly, and I couldn't get it. So thanks for saving me there.
Uh-huh.
But that's the part that I love the best, is when they're just kind of chit-chatting about what they're doing, and they find out, like, gosh, there's just so many commonalities and similarities of what we're doing.
Well, I think it's also a very common feeling to feel like you're flying solo out there and you're the only one that's feeling XYZ. You're the only one experiencing XYZ. And why can't I get my associates to 5K a day? And, why am I stuck here? Why are people not staying as long as we want them to? Why is operations always seem to run roughly at this location? And these are all things that can be addressed. But in the moment, I think people feel like that they're the only ones experiencing that. And you're very much not, first of all. Secondly, people that are speaking at this event have lived it. Multi-site experience, 3 decades? Dr. Solanki has built his own group practice. So we have the experience, and I'll pat our team on the back for that.
Don't age me that much. Okay. Let's just go with 2 decades.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, but we've talked about, the positives, what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned this before, but I really need to reiterate this. And we need to kind of chat about this quickly, is someone say, okay, well, why does it fail then? Right?
Yeah, good question.
Scaling fails the most often between 3 and 7 practices, depending how big they are, because you have not generated enough cash flow to add FTEs to specialize certain departments. The ones that I named: HR, finance, revenue cycle in particular, because your processes are not good enough. A lot of times when I've recommended to clients, you need an HR person, and they'll say, well, why do I need that? I said, because your director, when I asked them what a majority of their time of day is sucked away from them that's unplanned, that is nearly the number one answer. Think about how effective they'd be by taking that off. We can't afford it. Fair enough. If we shore up a couple areas and we can generate the cash flow for that position, will you commit to bring that position on? And nearly always they say, challenge accepted. And for those that we've added that position, it's been a 1 + 1 = 3 addition, because not only does the director or the lead COO or whoever that may be become way more effective and can macro manage, You're bringing in a subject matter expert that helps better with recruitment and retention so costs go down, training, compliance, risk. So you may say like, gosh, last year we spent all this money, say, in like unemployment charges or stuff, and like now we haven't. Right.
Yeah.
Because we've had fewer turnover, we've had better documentation, we've hired better people, we have scaled. So, what are the three failure drivers that are out there where someone says, hey, I'm between 3 and 7 practices, or I'm 8, or 9. One is you outgrew your operational systems. Okay. They're not scalable. You're on server-based platforms. You've got very archaic processes and standard procedures. You have not developed protocols that are scaled across the organization. You got like one titled person at every single office doing sort of the same job a different way. Missing management layers. We have a really top heavy and then bottom part of the hierarchy. We've got all of these managers. We've got very few what I call our worker bees that are really driving the processes from the integrators down, right? So the messaging is now lost. And then last is what we talked about. I'm going to kind of reverse it. Was we talked about having alignment with owners, equity owners, or associates, in not having clear incentives and misaligned visions. Right? Has something changed along the way? In the beginning, our end result was to grow to X. And then halfway on that journey, one partner decided, you know what, I've had enough. I want out now. We've got a misalignment, and that's happened, and that can permeate through the organization. So how do we ensure that foundation that we build, we are constantly watering it and feeding it and nurturing it to make sure that nobody is getting off of the bus, if you will, or getting misaligned because the messaging has not been driven home hard enough. So if we're going to talk about the things that we need to do to be successful at Polaris, one thing we are is radically candid. We want to tell you the things that you can do that can absolutely crack that foundation.
Yeah. And it goes back to the title of your session. We're solving for scale, because there are things that you have to solve before you can scale.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go to all these conferences and everything, scale this, scale that, scale. Could we talk about what we have to do first? Because you see people in there with 1 or 2 locations and they leave a little bit deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
I have to do all this before? Yes, you do. Sure, you can go and, raise capital, buy locations, start de novos, whatever you want to do there. But if they're not running operationally and clinically sound, what are you doing it for?
Yeah. And I think, you make a really great point. And I think, we talked about what are we solving for with regard to vision, like exit or partnership or strategic partnership or joint venture. But
Mm-hmm.
also, what are we solving for as it relates to the business from a financial standpoint? Is it just revenue? Is it just collections? Or is it EBITDA and cash flow? I always try to break things down to really simple terms with folks, because it helps me kind of understand the logic to it too. So I just share one quick anecdote.
Yeah.
Because I'm always good for one during these podcasts. But I recall when my kids were young and they went to daycare. I remember this was a really valuable lesson. They had to have one teacher's aide, if you will, for every 4 children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Toddlers. Now, if you're solving for revenue, you're like, oh my gosh, I got a 5th one. I'm really excited. But if you're solving for net profit, you're like, wait a minute, I'm in trouble here, because I have to now hire another full-time person for just one toddler. So and if you're thinking, yeah, but 5 generates more dollars than 4. So if you think about it in terms of that, and I hope our listeners are kind of pondering what I'm saying here, is that this is the true definition of scale. Maybe what you have to say is, I'm not taking on any more business. I'm not bringing any more toddlers into my daycare until I have at least a cluster of 3. Because if you think, if the first 3 pay the bills and the 4th one is profit, at
Mm-hmm.
least I am cash flow square.
Sure.
But
What
I'm
if that
losing money by making more money now if I don't do it the right way.
Sure. And let's say you acquire a practice that needs a lot of hands-on. You've just acquired, a redheaded hellion toddler that's going to take all your. No, I was so not that child.
Yeah, sure.
But it's going to take all of your effort and your bandwidth to course correct
Yeah.
for this one practice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And the things, we talk about it here too. The business that you walk away from can sometimes be more impactful than the business that you end up earning. And just driving the schedule more and more for the sake of liking to see a schedule all filled up. And then you're thinking, gosh, I'm not making any more money. This is why. You have not had a foundation to have the ability to bring in all these extra patients without adding the incremental expense for every single one. Now, if you're scaled, all those additional patients have a current team member that's going to handle somewhere in that life cycle, that cycle of service, whether it's revenue cycle, verification, hygiene, the associate, the doc themselves. We got all that covered. Mm-hmm. But if we don't do that from a scalable stance, driving more patient flow can literally make you less profitable.
Absolutely. And we've come full circle to why having a solid foundation before we think about doing anything else makes all the sense in the world. So I'm excited for your presentation. There's a lot more that Adin's going to share at our January event, so we did not give it away here. We go off on our tangents every single time, and you're all welcome. So
yeah. No, it was listen, another great episode. My favorite part when we chat, Jamie, is I get a lot of texts from listeners saying, hey, you both said something really impactful and got me thinking. And if there's something that for our listeners that Jamie and or I have said that sort of resonates, give us a call, give us an email. Let's set up a Zoom and chat. There's no harm in just grabbing a coffee and chatting about what you're looking to do. And if you have the opportunity to come and join us in Charlotte in January, it will be time and effort well spent in helping you spend some time with subject matter experts about how to build a better foundation of your current group practice.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Adin. Always good to have you on the show, and thanks for giving our listeners a little preview and sneak peek of what you'll be sharing, and it'll be candid conversations. That's just how we deliver it, and I think that's impactful with, like you said, with our listeners and with our attendees as well, the January Masterclass. Plus, you get some CEs along with it. All day Thursday. So I'll include a link to register in the show notes, like I mentioned. So once you complete your team's registration, you'll get an email with the hotel room block. So make sure you grab your room before they fill up. Well, thanks again for joining me here today, Adin. And to our audience, we appreciate that you support us by subscribing to the podcast. And we love your questions, so keep them all coming. And if you want to learn about any of our Polaris Expert Advisory services, or maybe there's a topic that we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to hear about, just send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or go ahead and visit our website, click on that Contact Us button at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a colleague and be sure to leave us a rating on any of your favorite podcast platforms. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.